Corporate finance practice problem using Excel. Internal rate of return, the IRR, the problem 2. Get ready, it's time to take your chance with corporate finance. Here we are in our Excel worksheet. If you have access to the Excel worksheet and would like to follow along, note that we're on the practice tab as opposed to the example tab. The example tab, in essence, being an answer key. Information, left side, blue area, right side. That's where we're going to populate our information. We're calculating the internal rate of return, the IRR, the We're going to do that a couple different ways. We're going to do that using the goal seek, which I think is going to be a more intuitive way of looking at this. We're going to do the net present value type of calculation, then use goal seek to seek the return. That would be the internal rate of return. Then we'll use the IRR formula, which is kind of the magic way, the easier way to do this if we have the information set up properly in order to use that formula. Keep in mind that when you're thinking about the IRR and the internal rate of return, you want to basically think about them together. What's the relationship between them as we look at these types of projects? The types of projects that we have is usually one where we have an initial investment and then we're having a return into the future. Might be a project, might be putting money into equipment as we're looking at here. It might be some kind of investment. But any kind of scenario like that where we're looking into the future, have to put a down payment now in order to generate future revenues. We're going to say we're putting $60,000 down for cash flows in the future of $12,000 for 6 years. We also have a cost of capital. This could be thought of as your minimum rate of return, your required rate of return, your hurdle rate. There could be different names for this rate. But basically the idea here is that if the project is above this rate, then it's something we might consider doing. If it's below that rate, then we're going to say that's below what we would want to be investing our money into. So that's going to be the idea that will take into consideration things like then the interest rate and opportunity cost, where else we can put our money in order to generate a return to figure out what this cost of capital is. Now, two ways we can then figure a project. We could say, okay, looking at this project, we could calculate the net present value using that 11% and then see if we come up to a positive number. Any positive number would then mean that we cleared the hurdle rate of the 11%, and the higher the number, the better. But anything that's positive, good. Anything negative, bad. That would mean we hadn't cleared the 11% and most likely would then reject it. Or we can calculate the internal rate of return directly and just see if that rate is bigger than the hurdle rate, which could also be useful for us comparing to other projects. So let's do this with the net present value first. What I'm going to do is start our series of payments. So we'll say 0, 1, and then I'm going to select these two items, grab the autofill handle, drag it on down and to here for 6 payments. And then alignment center, let's put the total on down below that, total. And then we'll have our series of payments. We're going to represent any payment going out as a negative, payment coming in, positive. The initial payment's going out, so I'm going to make it a negative 60,000. All other payments are going to be coming in because those are our returns. Those will be equal to the 12,000. I want to make that an absolute reference, so we can just simply copy it on down. I'm going to select F4 to do that. $sign before the B and 5. You only need a mixed reference, but an absolute one works. So then we're going to put our cursor back on that 12,000. Fill handle, dragging fill handle down. There's the 12,000 all the way down. If we then underline the 12,000 font group and underline, sum it up. So we sum it up and we're going to sum these. That's going to then be saying that we have 12,000 total of revenue after that. That's kind of funny that we got to the same 12,000 there. It looks a little funny there, but that just means that the total kind of net income on this, the gross receipts, if we don't take into consideration time value of money, 12,000. Okay. Let's take into consider time value of money. Let's present value each one of these, starting with the 60,000, which is at time 0, so it will be the same, but useful to do the present value sometimes if you want to copy the formula down and make it all uniform. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Negative present value, PV, shift 9, rate 11%. Now, hold on a second. Before I do this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this 11% into our goal seek formula over here. So we will do our calculation at the discount rate, see what our result will be at that 11%. Then we will use goal seek to figure out what this percent would need to be to see our series of payments be 0, net present value 0. So I'm going to say this is first going to just be 11%. I'm going to hard code it in so that I can use the goal seek later. 0.11, 11%. So that's the rate I want to use. So let's do it again. Negative PV shift 9. Rate is that 11%. It's outside the table. Therefore, if I wanted to copy it down, I'd have to use an absolute reference for it. We will see that shortly, but not yet. Comma. Number of periods, just 0. So that means comma, comma. We have no current amount, so we're just going to pick up the future value because it's present value of 1, not an annuity. 60,000 and enter. Same number because it's the same day. But we can copy that down. That's why we did it. Let's do it a couple more times. Negative present value, shift 9. Rate, the 11% outside the table. We would have to absolute reference that if we want to copy it down, but we're not going to do it now. Then number of periods, 1 year out now, comma, comma, because it's not an annuity, but present value of 1. Picking up that 12,000, then present valuing it 1 year back would give us the 10,811 at the 11% discount rate. Let's try it again. Negative PV, present value, shift 9, bracket, rate 11% outside the table. Not absolute referencing it yet, comma. Number of periods is going to be 2. We're talking 2 years out, comma, comma, because it's not an annuity, but present value of 1. Then picking up the 12,000 that we will present value 2 periods back, now equaling 9,739 if we take it back 2 periods. Let's do it one more time, and then we'll do the autofill. Negative present value, shift 9, rate 11%, comma, number of periods, 3 of them, 3 years out, comma, comma, because it's not an annuity, but present value of 1, 12,000, bringing it back 3 years, and enter. That would mean it's worth 8,774. You see the trend? It's going down because it's further out in the future. So it's worth less as of today, typically, unless you have negative interest rates or something, which could happen. And then let's delete these. Let's delete these now and then copy it down the easy way using autofill. Double clicking on this first one. This is why it would be useful to put a formula in there, even though it comes out to the same number, so that we can autofill anything outside the table, that 11%. We need to absolute reference telling Excel, do not move that down. Do not move that 11% down when I copy it or autofill it. And the way we tell Excel that is we put our cursor in F11, select F4 on the keyboard, or put a $ before the F and 11. You only need a mixed reference, but absolute works. So then enter, and then we're going to see if Excel obeys our command. We're going to then put our cursor on the fill handle, drag it on down, and there we have it. I'll double click on one of these down here to see if Excel did what we thought. It did. That looks like right. And then we still have that 11%. Didn't move that cell down relative. Good. And then we're going to go up to the font group, underline it here. Let's sum up this series of payments. Sum up the series. Sum it up. And there we have it. So it's a negative number. Not good. What does that mean? That means that the 11%, we don't come up with a positive. We didn't clear the hurdle. So we wouldn't accept it at that point. So right, we wouldn't accept it. Anything that was positive would mean that it was clearing it and we would accept it. And we might say, well, what, I mean, that's fine, but what is the actual rate that would make that 0? I mean, what is that series of payments? At what rate would it be 0? That's the question. One way we could do that is the trusty goal seek, because we can change this cell. We can say, hey, Excel, why don't you just tell us, like, change that cell to whatever it needs to be to make that cell 0. And you could do that manually. You could say, like, what if that was 10% or 9% and so on. Or you could tell Excel to do that, or ask Excel if you want to be nice to Excel. You can ask Excel, would you tell us, what that percent needs to be to make that 0? And Excel's like, it would be my pleasure. So the way to do that is you go to the Data tab and you say Forecast and What If Analysis, Goal Seek, and then we're going to say, I want to set that cell right there to be 0, which we have to hard code in here to be 0. By changing the percent. And that's it. And we're going to say, okay, Excel just will just brute force do it. And there it is. It's at the 5.47. So this is the internal rate of return that we backed into here. Notice once again, it's below 11, which is our hurdle rate. That's our cost of capital. That's our minimum rate of return. Therefore, we wouldn't accept it. But now we have an idea of what that is. And if we compare that to other projects, then we can see it. Now let's do it using the cool Excel formula, going right to it instead of using goal seek. we'll use the internal rate of return formula, the IRR function, the IRR function. So to do that, you have to put a series of payments in here to do it. So I'm going to do the same thing. We'd have to change this into like a series of payments. So we'd have to do the same thing, 0, 1, copy that on down, autofill it down, and then center it, home tab, alignment and center. We'll put the total on down below that, total. And then we'll pick up our series of payments at 0. That's going to be the outflow. Same concept. We're doing the same thing here, negative 60,000. That's how much we had to pay. And then we're going to have a series of 12,000s, all the same. So same concept here. We're going to pick up that 12,000. I'm going to F4 it so I can copy it on down. F4, enter. This time I'm going to do that without the autofill, all with the keyboards. Control C, shift, down, down, holding shift, down arrow, Control V. And there we have that, just to add a little spice and variety to things, because that's what life is made of, apparently. Spice of, I don't know, font group, underline. And then if we sum this up, we're same thing. We dragged it down, sum it up. And there we got that 12,000. So same series of numbers. That's what you have to do basically to use the internal rate of return function. The negative numbers being outflows, positive inflows. And then we can just do this in IRR, the IRR function, which is quite easy to use once you have populated the data appropriately, which would just be the IRR. And then you just go, well, you could double click on it or just shift 9. And then it's just like the sum function. We just select this range of numbers and then that's it. And we can close it up, but you don't even have to do it. Just like the sum function, Excel just won't even give you an error message or nothing. And then it does it for you, magic-like. But you got to make sure that you understand what that means. And I think if you do it with GoalSeek, it helps you to understand what that means. That rate, of course, once again, under the cost of capital. Therefore, we wouldn't accept it because we're saying we're only putting our money in stuff if we get a return greater than the 11%. And you're telling me that if I present value this, the rate, we're looking 5.47, which we've now calculated 2 different ways. So we're not going to, so both ways will get you to the same kind of answer, but you can see whether you use the net present value, in other words, or the IRR, internal rate of return. So they're both good, but they can be useful in different component circumstances. If you had a project where you're comparing one project to the other, then this internal rate of return, and you want to put money in one or the other, you can only do one, possibly they both clear the hurdle rate, let's imagine. Then it could be useful to calculate what the actual internal rate of return, just another way to look at the data.